Hi everyone, happy Earth Day. I'm Brian Hernandez. I am a junior double major in politics and education studies. I'm currently an intern at the Catholic Relief Services as a university and diversity engagement intern. I am presenting today a Guatemalan case study of the intersectionality between climate change and migration. So I am presenting a field study done by CRS in Guatemala. This field study consisted of a survey of 785 households in rural communities across Guatemala and 89 surveys that were conducted with urban youth in San Juan, Zacatepeque. The survey collected information on demographic and socioeconomic push and rootedness factors influencing the intention to migrate. Data was influenced at the individual and group level, and regression analyses were used to determine the weight of the different factors on the likelihood of migration to and develop profiles of these most and least likely to migrate. Qualitative interviews were conducted with 96 study participants, including 12 key informants. So the demographics of Guatemalan migration. The findings were that people with greater education are more likely to express the intention to migrate. Among those who had intentions to migrate, 29% had not finished elementary school as compared to 49% of those who did not express intention to migrate. Although males were likely to express intention to migrate, overall 15% of men versus 90% of women, this significant gender disparity disappears amongst the populations who are under 30 years old, and especially those with higher education, leading to a feminization of migration and a quote unquote female brain drain. Socioeconomic status, as measured by poverty index, did not have a significant quantitative association with intention to migrate. However, this study found that people living in extreme poverty and food insecurity were more likely to be undecided. So there was a migrant profile. It's split up into three different categories. So the lower intention to migrate, these people were more likely to be housewives or employed with skilled labor, had access to employment in their community, except for those who were involved in agricultural day labor who had higher intentions to migrate. They were more rooted in their communities, had a stronger perception of risks associated with their journey, participated in community development activities, had greater fear of contracting COVID-19. The undecided were more likely to be day laborers, unemployed skilled laborers, those without formal employment opportunities, and these undecided groups had a higher intention of, excuse me, a higher level of employment and lower levels of education, with greater attraction to a migratory destination. They had a strong cultural ties. They were more impacted by climate change and felt harvest. They were discouraged at future prospects and showed little to no optimism. Fear of detention. They had fear of detention in migratory process as well. Those with the higher intentions to migrate were more likely to be young. They had a greater presence of highly educated students and day laborers. They achieved a higher level of education but remained unemployed. They were more optimistic about the future and had their own capacity to create change. And they had increased intentions to migrate in search of better and more fulfilling job opportunities. CRS determined that the undecided people were more likely to be the most vulnerable group. They had the lower levels of schooling. They had more severe food insecurity. They had higher levels of extreme poverty, had a lower degree of social participation in their community, and had a lower perception of self-efficacy. The undecided were undecided because one, they didn't really have the material or social interests or even the realistic image of what society would be like outside of their outside of their lives, and they didn't really have the resources to imagine themselves even migrating. So they weren't really decided on migration because they didn't really have the resources or even had the fear of traveling back and forth throughout two different countries just to get to the US, but at the same time, they had the fear of even crossing borders. And overall, they were more focused on circumstances that increased the need to migrate, which climate change was the biggest one. whereas these people tend to be more agricultural workers, but at the same time, they're losing their jobs because one, there are greater droughts, two, uh, rain, the tropical rain has been a huge issue in Latin America. Uh, it has created a lot of migratory issues, more specifically the hurricane and the tropical storms that hit Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador that recently created a caravan of migrants at the U.S. border. The pushing factors and climate change. So, push factors were unemployment or a lack of formal employment, inequitable access to arable land, and perceived threat of natural disasters, discrimination, and feeling undervalued in one's community. The results from the qualitative interviews highlighted that many farmers in Guatemala saw migration as being a coping strategy to deal with increasing problematic trends in agriculture. Poor farmers suffer from lack of ownership of fertile land, lack of resources required to invest in irrigation, and or inputs to improve the productivity of the land. They lack the knowledge on the most effective practices to mitigate the effects of climate change and natural disasters. They had lack of access to fair and formal credit to invest in the land, and they had low and unpredictable wages associated with agricultural day labor. The damage from droughts and harvests is also having a significant impact on farmers, agricultural workers, and it has created a food insecurity crisis in the country in light of COVID. The impacts of COVID and migration on climate change, it has significantly impacted Guatemala. COVID-19 has exacerbated many of the causes that push people to migrate. In Guatemala, where according to the World Bank, 80% of workers are employed in the informal economy, curfews and restrictions on group gatherings and travel have caused many vulnerable populations to lose that's desperately the needed employment and income. Acute malnutrition has tripled since the beginning of the crisis, and maternal and childhood mortality rates are similarly expected to increase, which is pretty much a outcome of the lack of agricultural output that is connected to severe droughts, lack of resources for agriculture, and the tropical storms and the pretty much a significant change in climate in the area that has caused many to not even lose their job, but also not be they're unable to adapt to the significant changes of the land. The agricultural output, like I said, has severely impacted uh, migration and has led to severe food insecurity, which is at the end of the day hurting the children of many of these families. But one of the biggest question is how to prevent from migration. Of the 785 people surveyed, 77% had little or no intention to migrate from their communities. Among these populations, CRS identified that the shared factors that promoted rootedness or the desire to remain in one's country was access to basic health and educational services and stable and formal jobs, especially for young people. Access to formal education and other types of training when linked to profitable job opportunities, access and management of fertile land, and the ability to sustain harvest and to adapt to climate change to improve agricultural productivity. Community participation and leadership when linked to opportunities that were directly improve living conditions. The CRS mission in Guatemala has been tackling these issues as well. They have increased direct cash transfer programs that allow families to meet their immediate crisis and mitigate assisting and impeding food crises. They have increased access to agricultural inputs and training in climate small agricultural techniques that increase production and income for farmer families, and build resilience and food security. They have job skill training combined with cash assistance that allow youth to meet their basic needs while also receiving training that keeps the youth engaged and provides them with a pathway to formal employment. Um, there needs to be a significant engagement between the United States, Guatemala, and many other countries of Central America. Um, CRS proposes that we must develop a humane migration strategy. This strategy is not about just deterring migration, but actually caring about the people who are impacted and who are being forced to migrate. So the strategy is focused on vulnerable populations, and we the strategy as a whole has to understand that there are push factors that are rooted in the many of these countries. So it's going to require a lot of that understanding that although these countries have and they have full control of the government, they still can't be able to provide the basic needs for the country, and for the people that live there. So there has to be a significant understanding that migration is being rooted by countries who are unable to provide for themselves. So the United States needs to provide more to not only prevent migration, but to also give every single human who is likely to migrate the opportunity to meet some form of kindness or some form of basic needs, some form of basic human rights, and some form of dignity. There needs to be an increase in humanitarian and development funding in the region for programs that address push factors and promote rootedness factors. I've talked about this a little bit already. It's more about understanding the person, not just at the turn, but the Congress and the current administration should focus on actively collecting and allocating resources to build prosperous and safe communities rather than punishing people for migrating. The United States administration should request and the U.S. Congress should provide supplemental resources for international response to COVID-19. As of today, Guatemala has not received a single COVID vaccine. They haven't given anybody any COVID vaccine except for those who are very close to the current administration in Guatemala. Um, this is a significant issue because even though Guatemala is a sovereign state, they have not had the resources to provide for themselves, and this has led to significant food insecurity crisis. As I said, malnutrition has tripled with COVID, and that is continuing to hurt the people more as they continue. So there needs to be a significant increase in American involvement in that. Needs to be more focused on developing strategies on improving conditions for women and youth. This is significant because, like I said, these are very vulnerable groups, and they're not really given a formal opportunity in their countries, and therefore they are more likely to migrate. There needs to be support for institutional partnerships that increase employment opportunities. This is through vocational training opportunities, incorporating partnerships with the private and public sectors in order to create an employment pipeline. And this can be significantly implemented through organizations such as CRS and others that work directly as NGOs in those countries. And lastly, there needs to be a promotion of community engagement and leadership as a tenet in all development programs. Funding should be allocated to the community leaders rather than other uh, outlets that are more likely to lose that money, misspend that money, or use that money in a way where it goes to waste or doesn't really give uh, the vulnerable populations an opportunity. And that's all that I have. Thank you so much for everything.